Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be all of my 4.5 or 5-star reads in the fantasy genre. Obviously this excludes all of the urban fantasy books because I just had enough to make that its own separate video. Some of these I did read earlier on in 2019, so I'm going to do my best to remember what they're actually about. I've talked about several of these on my channel already, so I'm probably just going to do like general overviews. Like, obviously I loved all of these books and highly recommend them. These are in no particular order, so we'll talk about The Winter of the Witch first by Katherine Arden. So this is the third book in the Winter Night trilogy, and generally speaking this is like a fantasy series that's inspired by like Russian mythology and folktales and things like that. So in the first book, The Bear and the Nightingale, we follow the main character Vasilisa. Her mother dies, and then her father ends up marrying somebody else, but her new stepmother is like really devout and bids the whole family from honoring the household spirits. Vasilisa, or Vasya, can kind of like see these spirits and knows that like they're actually there. Things start to go wrong. Vasya must like use her gifts to save the day, essentially, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, preserving the old traditions. So this one, she's essentially trying to save Russia as a whole, and there's like a demon that they have to fight against, and she's kind of like conflicted between these two worlds of like, you know, magic type world and like the old ways, I guess, and then Russia itself and her family. It's a really great trilogy. It's perfect to read during the winter. I will say The Bear and the Nightingale was like my least favorite of the trilogy. Like, I'm pretty sure I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, so like it wasn't bad, but I just much preferred the second and third one. So I'm kind of curious like how I would rate The Bear and the Nightingale if I were to reread it. But anyway, like generally I highly suggest reading this trilogy. It's wonderful. It's very atmospheric. Again, perfect for winter. Next book I'll talk about is Starless by Jacqueline Carey. So this is, I think, a standalone fantasy novel where basically our two main characters are kind of like bound in a way. They have like, they're soul twins essentially. One of the characters is raised by a warrior sect, but he doesn't know certain secrets about himself until obviously it's like revealed in the book. He's supposed to be the protector of this princess, who's the other main character. Essentially we have like a dark god rising up, and they're fighting against this, and they have to join up with a crew of like prophecy seekers in order to save the day, essentially. Yeah, so that was like a very quick blurb, but this was really excellent. I really liked the characters. It was just like a really fantastic story. It's a fairly large book, but again, this is one where I was never bored. This is one I read early in 2019, so I'm like trying to remember how I felt about it. But like, I think generally I was just, yeah, really drawn into it. I feel like I teared up in places, so like it got the emotional connection from me. I'm pretty sure, again, that this is a standalone, so if you're looking for like a great standalone fantasy, you know, check this one out for sure. The next book I'll talk about is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. So this is kind of like a fantasy blended with some sci-fi, I guess, in that the magic system involves being able to talk to this like magical technology. I think this is an Italian type atmosphere. I could be wrong about that. It's been a little bit. But yeah, so we basically have like some sentient objects. Our main character is a thief, and so she's hired to steal this like really powerful artifact that could basically like change everything. So people are obviously after her to get this artifact for themselves. So she ends up joining up with like several other people in order to fight against this like oppressive government. Main character learns more about like her magic, and there's this connection with this artifact, which is really fantastic. I liked the main character quite a bit. The sequel is coming out sometime this year, maybe early 2020, I don't remember exactly when. If you're looking for something that's like about rebellion and has a really cool magic system that's like blended with technology, you know, I would definitely suggest this book for sure. The next book that I'll talk about is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. So this is one I've talked about several times on my channel. We've got this group of people, and they are like essentially descended from desert spirits, and they're kind of like persecuted through the Empire because of their blood. So then we have like the noble people who look down upon this, these magical people, I guess. Our main character has kind of mixed blood, I guess, so she has some magical abilities. The main character in this has the power to manipulate the dreams of the gods and uses her magic and is captured by the Emperor. He's like trying to control these people, and she essentially is like trying to fight back and free her people. I like have recently talked about this and how I did prefer this to Realm of Ash. Like I just really connected with the main character more, and I liked the romance in here quite a bit better. And I think, generally speaking, this is like a fun desert fantasy where there's obviously romance, there's magic. It's very much of like a rebellion type story, and it was just fantastic. I loved this book. While I didn't love Realm of Ash as much, I still definitely recommend this series as a whole. The next book I'll talk about is Witchmark by C.L. Polk. So this takes place in a world that's like inspired by Edwardian England in the shadow of a world war. So we've got noble families who have assorted magical gifts, and they use this to have like power in the world and control governments and things like that. So our main character is just like trying to live an independent life. So he's a doctor at a veterans hospital, and he is like trying to hide from his family because his magic is like kind of would cause him to either be committed to an asylum or like bound as a kind of a slave to his family. So he fought in the war and like fakes his death and works as a doctor. But I seem to remember there's like some sort of magical plague type thing happening, or just like generally some sort of disease element, and he's like trying to figure this out and stand up for himself and avoid his family from finding him. And it was just really wonderful. It's, I think, more of a character-driven fantasy. I loved the romance in here that develops, and I think we've got the companion novel / sequel coming out in February, something like that. But yeah, so this was just like very touching, just a really fantastic fantasy book. The next book I'll talk about is Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan. So this is kind of like a spin-off or follow-up to her Lady Trent series. What the Lady Trent series essentially is a like memoirs of this woman's life, and she's like a well-known naturalist and studies dragons, which is really cool. So this is like kind of like an alternative Victorian era England type fantasy setting, I guess. So in Turning Darkness into Light, we follow Lady Trent's granddaughter. So Audrey, the main character here, is supposed to translate these tablets that hold the secret to this draconian civilization. So it's like they're like a race of dragon people, essentially. She uncovers truths as she translates these documents and has to help prevent a war from starting and like preserve the rights of these draconian people. I really loved the setting. The Memoirs of Lady Trent is a fantastic series, and if you're looking for something where there's like lady scientists with dragons, definitely pick these books up for sure. The next book I'll talk about is The Beast's Heart by Leife Shallcross. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling from the Beast's point of view, and it was just wonderful. I think this is one of the better Beauty and the Beast retellings that I've read. We all know the story of Beauty and the Beast, so I'm not going to repeat it. We follow the Beast's point of view and learn more about how, he's been cursed and how he's able to get his Belle, essentially, to, like, come live with him and everything. I'm a big fan of fairy tale retellings, and Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorites, so I think this was an excellent retelling. I've already said that, but, if you're interested in a wonderful retelling of Beauty and the Beast, definitely pick this up. The next book I'll talk about is The Unbound Empire by Melissa Caruso. So this is the third book in the Swords and Fire trilogy, and I highly recommend you pick this series up. It's wonderful. We have mages who are the falcons, and they're kind of enslaved and tethered to their falconers, so their magic is kept under control. And throughout the series, there's a lot of political drama. The main characters are just fantastic. Amalia has to use her wits and come up with she's kind of like has to go into politics, and she wants to essentially like free or make the lives of the Falcons a little bit better. So she, is drafting policies to help change the world. But here we kind of have, there's also in another like nearby country, there's a lot more magic, and it's like each province, I guess, is governed by a witch lord. So here in this particular book, the things have kind of escalated. So they're having to deal with one of these witch lords trying to invade the country. Obviously, it's the third book in the trilogy, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it's a really great magic system. Like I said, I really love the characters, and the romance here that develops is wonderful again. So, yeah, I highly suggest you pick up this series. The next book I'll talk about is Sword and Pen by Rachel Caine. So this is the fifth and final book in the Great Library series, which is like an alternative world where the Great Library at Alexandria didn't burn down, and they like kind of control all of the written works in the world, and there's like a lot of censorship happening. So this one, I mean, again, last book, so I don't want to say too much about it, but they're fighting against the Great Library and kind of trying to figure out which direction, like, should the Great Library be should it evolve in some way, or should it just be completely destroyed? So our main characters are a group of friends who are leading the rebellion against the Great Library, and they continue to be wonderful. This one had some great moments. There was like a scene that reminded me of Indiana Jones. that was kind of fun, but each person in this group has different strengths. Like some are more like focused on battle, while others have like magical abilities, or others, use their wits. It's a really great series. Definitely recommend it for sure, especially if you're interested in like this alt history type of book. The next book that I'll talk about is Spend the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. So this is like a kind of mashup of Mulan meets Project Runway, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So our main character disguises herself as a boy because only men can be tailors in this world. Her father is summoned to court to compete for becoming like the royal tailor, essentially. So she disguises herself and goes in his place, so that, there's the Mulan trope. And so there are 12 tailors competing for this job. There's magic involved and, some scheming. And so this like Project Runway aspect is kind of, or competition, I guess, aspect is like the first half of the book. And then she has to journey to create these 3 gowns that are harnessing the power of like the moon, the stars, and the sun, or something like that. I don't exactly remember. But yeah, so it's a really cool premise, and I love those types of tropes. The romance in here is like a kind of a slow burn, kind of enemies to lovers, if I'm remembering that right. But it was just absolutely wonderful, and I really can't wait to pick up the next book. This one kind of ended in a place where I was like, what? I need more. So yeah, this was just wonderful. So the next 2 books that I'll talk about are Kill the Queen and Protect the Prince, both by Jennifer Estep. This is a really fun fantasy romance series. Our main character is like a kind of like a distant relative, I guess, of the royal family, but the royal family essentially gets massacred, and she ends up escaping this and kind of would be in line for the throne. So she is forced to hide in order to survive, so she joins up with the gladiator troops, so that was awesome. So she obviously starts to train with them. So her cousin, who is the one who like orchestrated this massacre, is kind of, like a really awful queen. So our main character has to become a gladiator, train to kill the queen, essentially. But the magic system is really cool in here, and I really like the main character, and the romance that's, developing in these books is kind of a slow burn, I would say. But I like it a lot. And so in Protect the Prince, she has to travel to a nearby kingdom to like create an alliance. But there's like, some conspiracy afoot, and she has to kind of uncover truths and like prove that she is in fact worthy of her position, and she discovers more things about her magic. So again, I was trying to be kind of vague, but I really love this series. I highly recommend it, especially if you're in the mood for some fantasy romance. The next book I'll talk about is The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the second book, and I can't remember the series, but it's the sequel to The City of Brass. This is like a fantasy that takes place in a desert setting. So the first book starts off in Cairo, I think, and then kind of goes to this like magical city of the jinn. Our main character summons a jinn in the first book, and you know, things kind of go awry, and she's like thrust into the court of Devabad and to survive there, and there's like magical things happening, and again, political drama and conspiracies. She learns more about her mother, I think, and just like her heritage in general. So this one, she continues to learn more about her family. One of the princes is exiled and hunted by assassins. Here we continue to kind of like uncover these secret truths and fight against this like threat that's brewing. This is just a really wonderful series. I very much enjoyed the setting and like this magic, and the characters are wonderful again. Last book I'll talk about is The Wolf and the Whale by Jordanna Brodsky. So this is another great one to read in the winter. I'm pretty sure I read it last January, so I'll try my best to remember what it's actually about, but it's pretty atmospheric, and I do think it's a great winter read. So essentially we follow an Inuit shaman and a Viking warrior. So our main character is, born with the soul of a hunter and the spirit of a wolf. So she's supposed to like protect her people, but the gods are no longer listening and her family is starving. So she is trying to help them survive. And she encounters this Viking warrior, and there's like this Norse god element, I guess, to it, and they team up and kind of have to save the day and prevent Vikings from invading. This was a really cool concept. I've never really read anything in this particular setting. I think it's actually loosely based on like some historical events. So there's this whole aspect of these gods from these two different cultures kind of meeting and having to fight against each other. So that was, I always love some mythology in my books, and this was just super cool to see. There is a bit of romance in here, and I seem to remember enjoying it. But yeah, so this is like a great book to pick up again during the winter. So those are all of my 4.5 or 5-star reads for fantasy books I read last year. I did love them all very much, and definitely recommend picking these series up and these books up. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. Also, if you want to tell me what your favorite fantasy book of 2019 was, that would be fun. I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.